Hey guys, I really want to welcome to the podcast President Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Mark Meadows was a former congressman from North Carolina's 11th district. He also chaired the House Freedom Caucus. He's the author of a new book called The Chief's Chief, a kind of window into the leadership of President Trump. Mark, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. Let me start with your book because we're going through a time of what appears to be just incompetent, disastrous, failed leadership on every front. Talk for a moment about what you think, what's wrong with Biden. Is it just Biden? Because there are people around him. And then perhaps say a word about how you would contrast Trump's leadership style, as you saw it close hand, with Biden's.
Well, I appreciate it. It's great to join you and all those that are tuning in today. Obviously, you've been a voice for freedom and truly for the American way of life that we all get to enjoy. So thank you so much for doing that. I can tell you in the Chief's Chief, we actually do contrast that. I talk about the Biden administration and the way that they don't make decisions. And I think that's a key component is that they not only do not make decisions, but they have paralysis around making any kind of consequential decision. So if it's a comment more than what flavor of ice cream are you eating, Joe Biden, he has a hard time actually weighing in on that. But the other, so to give you a little bit of a glimpse, and that's what the book does, is kind of brings you in the Oval Office, the way that President Trump actually made decisions. He did what I call creative chaos. So, for example, we're going to be talking about some issues today. He would get someone that has a strong opinion in favor of let's say infrastructure. And then he would get somebody that has a very negative opinion about the infrastructure bill. And then he would put the two of them against each other and kind of just sit back and watch them. He would watch the fight happen right there in the Oval Office. And then once they had passionately made their case, he would make a quick decision. I've never seen anybody that was more decisive and someone who ran back to what is best for America, that forgotten man and woman that you and I talk about on a regular basis. And so for him, I share a whole lot of the private stories that, quite frankly, you would only get if you actually were in the room where it happened. So many of these other authors are writing these books trying to talk about what happened. And I find them fascinating. Half of them I read, I said, well, they weren't even in the meeting, and yet they're talking as if they're an authority there. So the President Trump was really someone who would take action. You ask another specific question, so let me answer it. Some of the people around Joe Biden want to move him so far to the left that it is unrecognizable. So moderate Joe Biden he doesn't exist anymore. I don't know that he ever existed other than when he was in the Senate. But once he started being a candidate for the highest office in the land, what I found is that he literally is being influenced by so many other people that we've got to find a way to hopefully get back making the main thing the main thing.
Mark, in our younger days, we of course had an experience with President Reagan. I was in my 20s and I was, a low man on the totem pole, but I got to stand in the back of the room and I noticed some similarities. Reagan would have these roundtable meetings. You'd have passionate arguments going on back and forth with the Labor Department on one side, Pat Buchanan on the other side, and so Ed Meese on the third side. And Reagan would sort of take it all in. And I think if these debates went too long, sometimes I noticed that Reagan would tune out and sort of reach for the jelly beans. But he had something of the same style of listening to people who vigorously disagreed and then stepping in to chart a course of action. Take a moment to do so. I don't know if you do this in the book, but I think of Trump and Reagan as the two important figures in the Republican Party in the last 50 years or so. Spend a moment kind of comparing and contrasting the two. They were different in certain ways, weren't they?
Well, they were definitely different in certain ways. And obviously, when you look at Ronald Reagan and what he was able to do, he connected to the American people. That's the one thing that they have in common is Ronald Reagan connected to the average American in a way. And I tell this one story in the book. I was up in Pennsylvania, and there was a pipe fitter there. This guy, a union worker, and we were there at a rally. And I said, "Well, what is it that you like so much about Donald Trump?" And he thought for just a second. He goes, "He's just like me." Now that's interesting because you got a billionaire from New York and a pipe fitter that's a union worker in Pennsylvania, and yet they connected. But here's the other thing that you just mentioned. You were there watching those kinds of decisions. It actually made me a little uncomfortable, and I highlight that in the book. You know, when you get there and you've got cabinet members arguing with other cabinet members, and the voices get raised, and yet you know, if they get too off track, you're right that you know, whether it's reaching for a jelly bean, or in President Trump's case, reaching for a Starbucks or a Diet Coke, you know, it really is all about trying to make sure that the argument's clear. The other thing that is fascinating, the common thread between the two of them, is that they were largely ridiculed by those in the swamp, by those in Washington, D.C. Now, we hold Ronald Reagan in a very high regard right now because history certainly has been kind to his legacy and what he was able to accomplish. But as you recall, when he was in office, I mean, everybody else had a better idea and a better way to do it. And President Trump ran into the same things, oftentimes within his own administration. And so it's key that personnel is policy. And I think both of them recognize that.
You know, you're so right about that, because I remember a Republican saying about Reagan, "Oh, we can't let him meet with this guy. We can't let him meet with that," as if to say that Reagan would just fall for the latest thing that he heard. So there was this desire to manage Reagan. Now, very interesting. When we come back, I want to talk to Mark Meadows about some of the current issues that are swarming around us: infrastructure, the Biden Commission on the court, and perhaps also the border. We'll be right back.